You know that moment when you glance at a price tag, do the math in your head, and then just put it in the cart? No spreadsheet, no guilt spiral, no mental negotiation with yourself. That moment doesn't happen because you suddenly got rich. It happens because you crossed a line most people don't even know exists. Financial experts love to throw around numbers like $1 million or just save six figures and you'll feel free. But that's not where the shift actually happens. There's a much smaller number that flips a switch in your brain. And once you cross it, money starts working completely differently for you. That number is $15,000. My name is Jay, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time studying money, behavior, and why two people with the exact same income can end up in totally different financial universes. If you want the real mechanics behind wealth, instead of vague motivational fluff, subscribe and drop a like. It actually helps this channel grow. So before we get into why $15,000 matters so much, ask yourself this. What do you picture when you think of someone making it financially? A kid who inherited everything and never had to think twice? Or someone grinding for 30 years, dollar by dollar, until they finally retire? Neither of those is really how it works. Wealth isn't a straight line. It's a series of thresholds. And once you cross one, the entire game changes underneath you. Here's a way to think about it. A rocket doesn't gradually drift into orbit. For the first few minutes of flight, it's burning enormous amounts of fuel just to fight gravity, barely climbing, engines screaming. And from the ground, it almost looks like it's not moving at all. But once it hits a specific speed, something clicks. Gravity stops being the enemy. The rocket doesn't need to fight anymore. It just coasts. That speed is called escape velocity. And $15,000 is the closest thing your bank account has to it. Below that number, every dollar you save feels like it's fighting gravity. Above it, your money starts working with you instead of against you. And this is the part that surprises people. It's not really about the math. Yes, the math matters. We'll get there. But the bigger shift is neurological. There's a well-documented concept in behavioral economics called the bandwidth tax from researchers Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. When you're financially stretched, your brain isn't just short on cash, it's short on thinking capacity. Their research found that priming low-income participants to think about a serious financial problem caused a temporary drop in cognitive performance roughly equivalent to losing a full night of sleep. Not because they're less capable, because scarcity itself eats the mental bandwidth you'd otherwise use for planning, patience, and problem solving. Your brain isn't broken when you're broke. It's just busy running threat detection instead of strategy.
That's why, when you don't have a buffer, you take the mediocre job because you can't afford to wait for a better one. You stay quiet about the toxic manager because a paycheck now beats principles later. You say yes to things that drain you because saying no feels like a luxury you haven't earned yet. This isn't a character flaw. It's your brain doing exactly what scarcity trains it to do. But cross that $15,000 line, and the whole operating system changes. Instead of, how do I make it to Friday? Your brain starts asking, how do I make this grow? Instead of playing defense against every surprise expense, you start playing offense with your future. Some of this shift happens earlier than you'd think. Even a modest buffer, in the range of a few hundred to a couple $1,000s, has been shown to meaningfully reduce financial stress and improve overall well-being. But that early cushion mostly protects you from disaster. It doesn't yet give your brain room to dream. Somewhere around 3 to 6 months of expenses, which for a lot of people lands right around $15,000, is where the shift moves from I won't drown to I could actually build something. Now, let's talk about the math, because this is where it gets fun. Say you're setting aside $800 a month and investing it at a steady 8% average return. Getting to your first $15,000 takes roughly 17 months.
Almost a year and a half of consistently choosing your future over your present. That stretch is brutal for most people, which is exactly why most people quit before they get there. Here's the twist. Your second $15,000 doesn't take 17 months. It takes about 15. Same monthly contribution, same effort, same risk, but 2 months faster. Because your first $15,000 is no longer sitting still. It's earning alongside you. That's compounding starting to lean in. By the time you're chasing your fourth or fifth $15,000, the timeline keeps shrinking. Not because you're working harder, but because your money is finally pulling its own weight. Once your portfolio crosses roughly $300,000, you can generate another $15,000 in under 4 months without adding a single extra dollar of effort. The milestone that once took you a year and a half is now something your investments do almost on autopilot.
People assume the ultra-wealthy have access to some secret investment world regular people can't touch. At the extreme high end, sure, some of that exists. But that's not what's driving this. It's just arithmetic doing what arithmetic does. A 10% return on $1,500 is $150. Fine, but forgettable. A 10% return on $15,000 is $1,500. Now you're talking about money that shows up whether or not you had a good month at work. That's the entire trick. Same index fund, same brokerage, same basic strategy available to literally anyone. The only variable that changed is scale, and scale is what turns a rounding error into real progress.
But here's what almost nobody talks about, and it might matter more than any of the math. Saving your first $15,000 from nothing isn't really a savings achievement. It's proof of a skill. Unless you inherited it or stumbled into a windfall, getting there required tracking your spending, saying no to things you wanted, resisting impulse buys, and doing all of that on repeat for well over a year without quitting. What you actually built wasn't a bank balance. It was evidence to yourself that you can choose the future over the present when it counts. That's not a money skill. That's a life skill wearing a money costume. And it changes how you experience every dollar after that. Before you hit that number, a $5 coffee might trigger a tiny internal debate. After you hit it, you stop sweating things that small. Not because you're careless, but because you've already proven you can handle the decisions that actually matter. It also changes how you experience bad luck. When you're living tight, every surprise is a crisis. The car breaks down, that's a 5-alarm fire. Rent goes up, that's a panic spiral. But with $15,000 sitting behind you, the same events become inconveniences instead of emergencies. Car trouble? Annoying, handled. Rent increase? Maybe it's finally time to negotiate or move somewhere better. And you start noticing doors that were always there, but you couldn't walk through before. A friend's small business needs early investors. Before, you'd have nodded politely. Now you can actually run the numbers. A fixer-upper property pops up at a steal. Before, you'd have scrolled past on your phone. Now you can seriously evaluate it. This is what people mean when they say money attracts money. It's not mystical. It's that money buys options, and options are what create more money. There's also a strange shift in what you actually worry about. When you're broke, you obsess over the tiny stuff. Generic versus name brand, regular versus premium gas, whether $4 for coffee is worth it. Once you've got real footing, you realize those decisions barely move the needle. Skipping the daily coffee might save you $1,000 a year, which isn't nothing, but it's not what determines whether you retire comfortably. What actually moves your net worth is where you live, what you drive, how consistently you invest, and how long you let it compound. So the smart move isn't agonizing over the organic bananas, it's redirecting that mental energy toward the 2 or 3 decisions that are actually load-bearing. This shift bleeds directly into your career, and this is where it gets genuinely powerful. When you're one missed paycheck from disaster, you're stuck. You can't push back on a bad boss. You can't ask for the raise you've earned because rocking the boat feels too risky. You can't take 2 days off to interview somewhere better because you can't afford the gap if it doesn't pan out. Everyone in the room, including you, can feel that you have no leverage.
$15,000 hands you leverage. Call it walkaway money. You could quit tomorrow and survive comfortably for months while you find something better. You probably won't need to use it, but just having it changes how you show up. You ask for the raise because a no won't sink you. You push back on unreasonable demands because you're not negotiating from fear anymore. You take the interview because the risk is manageable now. And ironically, that new confidence often gets rewarded before you ever have to cash in the safety net. People respond to it. Better assignments start landing on your desk. Recognition follows. And often, more money follows that. It compounds right alongside your investments. Now, here's where a lot of people torch all that progress. They hit $15,000, feel the shift, and immediately treat it like a prize to be spent. A new car because they earned it, a trip because they deserve it, a down payment on something they can't actually afford. Don't do that. That number isn't a reward, it's a foundation. It's the seed, not the harvest.
And nowhere is that trap more common than with cars. The average person will spend more on transportation over a lifetime than it would take to reach financial independence entirely. Between payments, insurance, maintenance, and gas, a lot of people are burning $600 to $800 a month just to get around. Over 40 years, that's easily $300,000 or more, money that could have been compounding instead of depreciating. And depreciating is the right word. A new car loses roughly a fifth of its value the moment it leaves the lot. You're not spending money there. You're setting it on fire. Once you've got that $15,000 buffer, though, your relationship with big purchases changes. The question stops being, can I cover the monthly payment? And becomes, what does this actually cost me down the road? A $30,000 car isn't just $30,000. Invested instead, that same amount could grow past $150,000 over 20 years. Suddenly, the reliable used car doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It feels like a strategic play for your own freedom. The person leasing the flashy SUV is often quietly stressed about money. The person driving the older Camry is often quietly building a life they don't have to escape from. That lens eventually spreads to everything. Housing, vacations, hobbies, all of it gets weighed against what you're actually trading away. Not in a joyless, penny-pinching way, in a deliberate one. And here's the part that catches people off guard. Once you start thinking this way, you often discover you didn't want half the things you thought you did. The bigger apartment sounds nice, but is it worth pushing back your freedom by years? That expensive hobby is fun, sure, but there's usually a cheaper version that scratches the same itch just as well. $15,000 won't make you rich. Let's be clear about that. But it will change how your brain processes risk, opportunity, and time. And that shift is worth more than the number itself. It's the difference between reacting to your life and actually designing it. Start building toward it now, because the version of you standing on the other side of that threshold is going to be very glad you did.